It has not yet been even a year since Canada's new law on doctor-assisted dying came into force. It passed in June 2016, and by the end of last year, already nearly 750 people had sought the help that Bill C-14 enabled. One such patient was Daniel William Haggerty. His two daughters, Melissa and Melanie Haggerty, helped their father prepare to enact his wishes, and they join us now to reflect on the life and death of their dad. It's great to welcome both of you here to TVO tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. We are going to have, as they say, a discussion with experts coming up after this from 30,000 feet to talk about some of the bigger issues that this situation arises. But we thought it made sense to actually get a real-life example of how this all works from two people who've been through it. So you're the older.
Correct.
I'm the older. You get to go first.
Excellent.
Let's find out about your dad. Where was he born?
He was born in Regina, Saskatchewan, in the middle of the Depression, and grew up in a fairly poor family, but did good. And he moved to Toronto after university and then went around the world and ended up traveling to over 100 countries through his career and his interests and things.
What was his career, Mel?
He had a few careers. He was in marketing and advertising for a long time, and then we lived in Montreal, came back to Toronto, and he got the job of his lifetime, which was CESO, which is Canadian Executive Service Organization, and that's how he was able to do tons of traveling.
What kind of dad was he?
He was great. I mean, there's almost no description for the kind of compassionate, patient. Oh my goodness, he was patient. He was surrounded by women, and as he said even one time, even the goddamn dog is a female. But no, he was a very, very dear, kind, intelligent, patient,
Generous.
and generous man.
Sounds like he had a sense of humor, too.
He did.
He had to.
He had to because surrounded by
Because of
that
us.
many women.
Yes,
He had to.
yeah.
Gotcha. Now, Melanie, a couple of years ago, his health took a turn for the worse, right?
It did.
What happened?
In 2015, we started 2015, he had a stroke, a mild stroke, but he was in the hospital, then had to go to rehab. Then a couple months later, as a result of the stroke, an abscess had formed in his stomach. So back to hospital, back to rehab. He had a couple different back surgeries for his scoliosis. And then in the fall, he had a perforated bowel, had to get a colostomy. And while in hospital, he contracted C. difficile.
Now, none of the first group of things you mentioned is actually fatal, but C. diff can be, right?
C. diff can be.
And was it trending that way in your dad's case?
No.
But he's 81 or something at the time?
At the time.
And I guess it was you, Melanie, it was you, right, who said, if you were a dog,
Yes.
What was the line?
I told him that if he was my dog, I would have put him down by now.
How did he take that, Mel?
He asked me to call the vet.
Again, going back to that sense of humor.
Yeah.
At what point, I mean, obviously his health continues to take a turn. At what point does anybody raise the issue of the timing of his death and who should control that?
Well, it probably started then in the hospital at that time first, but the backstory too is that he had crippling rheumatoid arthritis. So like he had to open his hands like this. He also had Bell's palsy, which is part of the story because that's how we ended up finding out that he in fact had a brain tumor in the end, a malignant brain tumor. But that started 2 years before that. And he had scoliosis of the spine that in fact was the thing that he complained about more than anything else in the entire experience.
Now, when I hear brain tumor, that sounds fatal.
Correct. So that
that's
was in
what-
fact the thing that allowed him to sign all the documents because his death was foreseeable in the near future.
Which is the prerequisite to qualifying under the law, the new
Correct.
law. Was it his idea to seek out the timing of his own death?
Yes, a doctor came to offer palliative services and basically keep him comfortable. And then after being there for a couple hours, asked what we knew about MAID, and our father was like, finally, someone.
Well, in fact, he'd asked,
Yeah.
he was living in a retirement home, and they had come to see him just before this doctor came in, and he said, I'd like to talk to someone about MAID, like who can help me with this?
MAID.
Yes, medical assistance in dying, and nobody knows. Nobody knew how to help him. And then literally 2.5 hours later after this doctor had heard everything that was wrong with our father, which the list was incredible, he said, "Has anyone talked to you about this?" And our father perked right up. He's like, "I've been waiting for this." Like, who? So that was the doctor who then explained to us, remarkably, that he had been one of the physicians who had actually written the law and gone to the Supreme Court with the whole legal team. So the fact that that man was the man that walked into our lives that day was a beautiful coincidence, but it worked out really well in our father's favor.
When your father, Melanie, said, "Okay, this is the news I've been waiting for," did anybody else in the family try to talk him out of it?
No, we did not. Our stepmother really wanted him to try the options through that palliative care that the doctor was, like a pain pump, upping his meds, and he agreed to do it, and that was a Friday. And then Saturday morning, he called a family meeting, and he's like, "No, I'm done."
He thought about it overnight, and he said, "No, you know what, I'm done." And
Why do you think?
well, we didn't really explain everything that was wrong with him, but if you had heard everything, there was absolutely zero quality of life. One of the things that was very embarrassing to him was because of his palsy, every time he ate or drank, everything fell out. And he was an elegant man, so that was, I mean, it seems like a superficial thing, but it was very, very embarrassing to him. Every meal just came right out.
And no prospect of recovery of any of the things that
Correct.
were ailing him. He picked December 23rd, 2016 to have it happen.
Because that was the earliest date. Otherwise, it would have to be the 29th or 30th because of Christmas and holidays and people's time off. And so there's a quick discussion amongst the family, and he was ready. If he could have gone that day, he would have. He was ready.
So he was ready and eventually convinced you, I guess, that this was what he wanted and you should not intervene. Once the family has sort of come to that conclusion, then what do you do?
Well, it wasn't even like that. He didn't have to convince us. It was really interesting. He had been talking about something like this for a long time. So the fact that we finally had someone that could help him just, I think, made it move very quickly. So we were kind of reacting to that a little bit. However, there wasn't a moment's hesitation on our part, because I think we both understood that this wasn't about us. This was about him and his wishes. And ultimately, how can you stop and stand in the way of someone?
Well, because kids do that. Lots of people do that. Lots of people say, "You may want to go now, but I'm not ready to let you go."
For sure.
But
Well,
you didn't have that sense, Mel?
Not at all.
No. He just sat in a chair. He could barely walk.
Yeah.
He had to have his eye sewn permanently shut like a few days before the doctor came into our lives. His other eye was bad. I mean, he had a colostomy. Like there was nothing.
It was
nothing.
time.
It was time.
It was time.
Tell us how the date, the 23rd of December, 2016, why don't you start? How did the day unfold?
It started the night before, and we were all sitting in his dining room right outside of his bedroom writing his obituary. And that was pretty surreal. We're all writing the obituary. And
Together?
Together. We were writing it, and then a nurse came that night to hook up 2 IVs because the procedure was going to be first thing in the morning the next day. And the doctor had explained to us that they have to do this because IVs fail or veins shut down. So can you imagine if the family's ready to go and that happens? So
it's a backup.
As a precaution, there's 2. So that's where it started. And then 5 o'clock in the morning the next day, our stepmother arrived. She did not live with him, but she arrived just to spend some time with him. We arrived around 7 a.m. with our 2 dogs. The whole family was there. And my first order of business was to read him the obituary. So that was quite funny because it was on my computer, and he was quite deaf. I didn't tell you that part too. So I had to get right up to his head, and I was instructed to read it slowly and loudly. So I did, and while all 4 of us had worked on it the night before, it was nerve-wracking to read someone his life story in just a few short words.
And he signed off on it, Melanie?
He signed off on it.
He did?
He did.
With one word, which was, "It's lovely."
Huh?
But he did correct. He was 83, and she had in his 83rd year, and he said, "No, I'm in my 84th year."
Yeah, so he made a correction to his own obituary. Yeah.
Got to get it right. I know. Got to get it right. You played music
We did.
as it was happening.
We did.
Tell me about that.
Our mother had passed away about 20 years ago, and while she was dying, and we kept her at home, and she died of a brain tumor too.
Weird.
Our father got up and put on "It's a Wonderful Life" by Louis Armstrong. Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong. And so we asked our father if he would like music, and he chose that song, but not that version. He wanted the Mormon Tabernacle Choir version.
Yep, in the 20 years, he decided he preferred the Mormon Tabernacle Choir version, which hilariously, it's a 5-minute version.
I was going to say it's longer.
It's way better because we didn't know how long the procedure was actually going to take. So, and what was really beautiful, which I'd never really noticed before, was when the music started and the procedure started, it sounded like there were angels in the room because of the choir. It was really very beautiful, very profound.
Now you talk about quote unquote the procedure.
Yeah.
What is the procedure?
Well, it's his was, I guess, technically euthanasia and done through IV.
So they administer
yes,
intravenously
yes.
something that will end his life?
Yes, they have
medications.
3 medications. The first is midazolam, and that actually puts you to sleep. Then the second one is propofol, and that induces a coma. And they said that a lot of the patients pass during propofol. And then the third one, and I never get this right, it's something like rocnamonium.
Rocnamonium.
And that basically stops the heart. And our father did pass during propofol.
The second drug.
And you were there?
Yes.
We were all there.
So the nurse and the 2 doctors were on one side of the bed. Our stepmother, my sister, and I were on the other side of the bed. Holding
All holding on to a different
parts of his
part
body.
of his body. It was very funny.
Did they actually administer the third drug?
Yes.
They did.
Yes.
Which
All 3.
I actually asked about that because he had passed during the second one and we could tell immediately. But they said they had to. It's just part of the procedure.
Okay, can we get into some uncomfortable questions now? Either 2 of you religious at all?
No.
Not
No.
particularly? Not
No.
particularly.
No.
But I'm guessing you belonged to a church at some point in your life, or you grew up in a church at some
We were
point?
good Anglican
You were
girls.
good Anglican
Yeah.
girls once upon a time. Did you get feedback from your church or from friends or extended family or something on the advisability of doing what you all did?
No, not necessarily, although when we were looking for witnesses, so 10 days before the procedure was actually done, he had to essentially sign a document that signed his life away. And we needed 2 witnesses for that who could not benefit from his death in any way. So
unrelated to him, in other words.
correct. So the first person we asked was over there in a shot. She was proud and pleased to be a part of this. The second 2 people said no.
Because?
One was a good Catholic, and I think she was like, no. And the second one is actually a good Catholic also, but I don't. She just said, "I'll sign it, but I won't see your father."
Well, the first one also, she said if it was for me, she wouldn't have an issue, but she didn't know my father as well, and just couldn't.
She wasn't sure she wanted to
and that was
participate.
fine. And that was fine.
Which,
so.
and we've said this. The beautiful thing about Canada is, it's absolutely their right to say no. We just moved on. We're like, that's fine. That's their right. Let's just find someone else who can do this, and
Which
we did.
you did. Did was there any sort of uncomfortable moments there trying to get people to do this?
Actually,
No?
no. And I think most people had just sort of witnessed his long, slow decline, and everyone that knew him was really good with it. And in fact, we had a party 3 days before he died, where 16 or 18 of his oldest friends came to say goodbye. And they were all a little bit freaked out when we first called to tell them what he was doing. But by the time the party came around and everyone got to personally say goodbye to him, which was a beautiful thing, they all turned to us and they're like, I would do this too if I was in his shoes. So I think initially, but then everyone was great with it.
Melanie, the official word on, is it your father's death certificate, is that he committed suicide.
It's a suicide, but they are able to reword or add verbiage. We actually never saw it, but the doctor told us that there is other verbiage that goes with it that puts it nicer.
Well, I was
Words
going to
it-
ask you, what do you, that is a very, committed suicide is an expression fraught with a whole bunch of stuff.
That's right.
How did you feel about that notion?
I didn't really care, honestly, and he was so miserable. He was so miserable, and between like the 3 of us, our stepmother, he was almost like a full-time job as well, like the doctors and everything, and keeping an eye on him, and he was ready, and he was ready.
Also,
So-
it ends up being a word, which is, it wasn't really how he killed himself. He did not actually kill himself.
Well, that's why I raised the issue,
Right.
because he
Yeah.
didn't do it to himself.
That's right.
Yeah.
He allowed it to happen, but it's not exactly the same as what we traditionally think of in committing suicide.
Correct.
Do we need new words then to describe what's going on?
I think so, and they told us that they are actually working on that. I think the law is still evolving.
If you look at MAID online, because I did, because there's two things, you can take the pill or you can do it through IV. And the pill is suicide and the IV is considered euthanasia.
Because a doctor is doing it,
Administering
Is
it.
it-
to you.
Yeah.
That's right.
Gotcha.
Well, we were asked, just on the suicide note, he was asked a very good question. They have to go through 2 interviews before this is actually, he gets the big stamp to say, yes, let's do this. And one of the questions was, you have a cupboard full of opiates in your bathroom. Why have you not taken your own life before now?
What did he say?
Well, I thought it was really interesting. He said, well, 2 reasons. He said, one is, what if it didn't work and I end up in even worse shape than I am now? And then he said something that I thought was really profound. He said, I would never want to cause shame or embarrassment to my family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for coming in tonight and sharing your story. And we're going to follow up on that and get some more quote-unquote expert feedback to what you two have been through. And good luck going forward. Thank you very,
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Melissa and Melanie Haggerty.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.